Hello world, welcome back to the Razor RC, and today we're going to be doing the full review of the Traxxas E-Revo 2.0 here in front of us. This is a 1/8 scale 6S capable electric 4-wheel drive truggy from Traxxas. So this is the 2.0, obviously the follow-on to the 1.0. It's been out for about 3 years, sells for $650 at the time of this video here in the United States, and this is the electric version. Now they also make the Revo, which is a nitro powered version, although that's really more based on the 1.0. So yeah, this has been out for a few years. Picked it up about a month ago. My local hobby shop was having a sale. I will put a link down in the description below where you can pick one of these up if you're interested, and I thought I'd share my full thoughts on this. Now the way this works is we're going to be giving it a score in 7 different categories, giving a rating from 1 to 5 stars, and it is graded on a curve, which means this is going to be rated as compared to other 1/8 scale 6S electric truggies on the RTR market. So those are going to be things like the Team Corrali, Kronos, or Punisher. I have a Punisher, so very familiar with that vehicle. Also the Arma Creighton, of course, the 6S version. I also have one of those. So we're going to give it a rating from 1 to 5 stars. 3 stars means it's average as compared to the other RTR truggies out there. 5 stars would mean it's best in class, and 1 star would mean it's obviously worst in class. So the first category is the electronics, and the E-Revo 2.0 comes with this, the TQI radio. Comes with all their Traxxas vehicles, at least the higher end versions. They also make a regular TQ radio, which doesn't quite have as many features, but honestly actually a pretty decent radio. Certainly very good for an RTR radio. Nice trigger pull, fairly stiff. The foam wheel is actually really nice, a little bit on the smaller side, but this radio is excellent, especially for an RTR radio. Actually has a ton of adjustments, a lot of tunability, the endpoints, the expo, servo reversing, all that is available on this radio. Although I do recommend you pick up the Traxxas Link. It's basically a Bluetooth module that allows you to hook up your phone and run an app on there to make the adjustments to this radio. It also has TSM, which is the Traxxas Stability Management, as well as the self-righting feature. I don't personally use those 2 features, but they are, certainly nice little advantages that this radio and receiver have that most other RTRs do not. Finally, it also actually has multi-model memory, so you can use a single radio to control all your Traxxas vehicles. That's what I do. I use this one radio for all of my vehicles, the Stampede, the Haas, the Max, the X-Max, all that are all bound to this single radio, and so I can just pick this up, only keep this one charged, and control any of my Traxxas vehicles. It also has auto model selection, so really you just power on your vehicle with this radio already on, and it will just find it automatically, assuming they've all been bound to this radio. So actually a pretty good radio, one of the better ones out there on the market. I do recommend getting that Traxxas Link. It will make your life a heck of a lot easier, although you have to spend a few more dollars for that. Pulling off the body, we can take a look at the RC truck itself. Obviously, it's got the dual servo design. They are plastic geared servos. I think they're the 2075 servos. Pretty weak servos, although there are 2 of them, so it actually works okay. Those are probably a little bit below average. They're not metal geared or anything like that, so they do actually have 2 of them just so it has enough power to turn the wheels. It's got the Traxxas VXL 6S ESC. Again, Traxxas ESCs, I think they're fair. They're not the best ESCs out there. I do kind of like some of the Hobby Wing rebranded ESCs out there. I think they're a little more reliable, probably a little more power as well, but the VXL 6S actually works okay. Some people have had trouble with Traxxas ESCs, so they may be a little more unreliable. I'm not really sure. I've never really had a VXL go bad on me, but the 6S, there's one thing I really don't like about this ESC, and that is it has no off button. So for some reason, in like the last year, Traxxas decided to update the firmware in all their VXL 6Ss. So to turn off the vehicle, you actually have to unplug it. It tells you that in the manual. This power button does not turn off the vehicle. I find that super annoying and kind of dumb. Not really sure why they did that. Probably just to prevent people from accidentally leaving their batteries plugged in, but I find that really kind of stupid. So not a fan of that. And then here's the Traxxas motor. Pretty standard 6S motor. I think it's like a 40 by 72, something like that. Don't know the exact dimensions offhand, but a solid motor, plenty of power. This is actually a pretty decent power system. In the electronics category, I'm actually going to give it 3 stars. I think the ESC is a little bit below average. The motor's kind of average. The radio probably a little above average, but the servos again below average. It does require 2 batteries, which again I think is a little bit annoying for a 6S vehicle, so you can only run 3S batteries. But in the electronics department, no real complaints. These servos actually have been holding up. I'll talk more about how to make sure those are working correctly. But yeah, sort of overall, I think kind of an average power system. I don't think there's any need to upgrade this stuff. Certainly if you have other Traxxas vehicles, you can just keep on using your TQI, no problems there. Motor and ESC have plenty of power. I don't think it's slow by any means. And so it works overall, but certainly not best in class. 3 stars. In terms of the build, we're really talking about how it came from the manufacturer. Was it ready to run? Were there any issues? Were the diffs filled, shocks filled, all that kind of stuff? Overall, I'd say the build is pretty typical for an RTR. No real issues. These are made in Taiwan. I think the quality is slightly better than some of the other brands out there made in China. But yeah, the diffs are totally fine. They do have 20 million weight in the center diff. I think it's 50K in the front and rear diffs. No issues there. The shocks are full oil. Some minor things like the camber was set a little bit incorrectly on the front end. It's supposed to be -1 degrees. They have it at 0 degrees. Really minor stuff like that that were not set totally correctly. The endpoints, that's pretty typical. But there was one major problem that I'm going to get into, and that's really that the dual servos on this vehicle. So it's got 2 servos basically connected together and turning this arm right here. The servos were not lined up correctly. Unfortunately, with a dual servo design like the Traxxas E-Revo 2.0 has, these things have to be completely in sync. They're both basically turning the steering at the exact same time. If they're not perfectly lined up, they're actually kind of going to be fighting each other, kind of straining against each other. It's kind of like 2 people in a rowboat, sort of fighting against each other, not really rowing in sync, and will lead to premature failure of the servos. So these servos are okay. They're kind of slow, kind of weak, but at least there's 2 of them, so they provide a little more power. But if they're not lined up perfectly, they are actually going to burn out prematurely. A lot of people talk about these servos only lasting 5 or 10 packs. Mine are still running fine, no issues there, but I did have to go and realign these servo horns, get the steering exactly set up correctly, and they weren't set up from the factory anywhere close. Actually, they were completely wrong. They were off by quite a bit. So yeah, your servos are going to burn up like that. So unfortunately, if you're not really familiar with how to set up a dual servo type system, you're going to have problems. You're probably going to burn out your servos pretty quickly and have to buy a new one. So that is a major downside. So yeah, in the build category, I'm actually going to give it 2 stars. That is a major concern for me, that the servos were not set up correctly, and most people are honestly not even going to check it or even know how to set it. There are instructions in the manual on how to do it, but yeah, for the average person that picks one of these up, they're not going to know, and they're going to end up having to buy a new servo, probably within a month or so. So anyways, in the build category, I'm going to give it 2 stars. I do think it's below average, just purely based on that steering system and having to fix that out of the box, and something most people are not going to know to do. The E-Revo has a very unusual design. Nothing really like this out on the market. I know a lot of people complain about Traxxas's legal practices. They like to sue people, that kind of thing. But you also have to admit they do come up with very innovative type designs. Whether they're good and bad is up to you. But they are definitely kind of unique. So the E-Revo 2.0 again falls within that vein. We'll just kind of walk through the vehicle, kind of front to back. So obviously it's got the pivot ball suspension both in the front and the rear. That is unusual. It's got the tie rods basically for the suspension to the signature lay down shocks. That again is quite unusual. Upper and lower arms, steel CVAs, which is pretty nice. Plastic shock towers front and back. So that, a little bit unusual for an 8 scale vehicle, but it works totally fine. Plastic tub chassis, of course. Dual servos, as we mentioned. Dual battery compartments as well. It does have these interesting little sort of vents or air intakes to cool down your battery while they're running, keep them nice and fresh, not overheat. motor ESC on top in the middle of the vehicle, a little bit of cooling fins here on the motor plate. Does have a standard differential in the middle with a cush drive, steel spur gear. That is an upgrade from the original Erevo 1.0, which had the slipper clutch. You see, like I mentioned, on the side, slightly offset. You know, the motor's not completely in the middle, but I think that weight distribution is pretty good. Rear vents in the back basically allow the air to come out of the battery compartments. Just has these couple little clips to hold the batteries in place. It will only carry basically smaller size 3S packs, so it's pretty difficult to find hard case packs that are 3S that will fit. You know, it's about 25 millimeters in height or so is what you're limited to. I think there are Traxxas soft packs out there as well as other soft packs, but if you like running hard case like I do, it is a little bit difficult to find 3S packs that will fit. Lay down shocks in the back, of course, with the rocker arms. One cool thing about the rocker arms is they do make different rocker arms for different progressive rates. I do have a video on that on how to get a little bit better performance out of this vehicle without spending a whole lot of money. Plastic drive shafts down the middle, which I found rather unusual. They do have steel drive shafts out to the corners, but down the center, plastic drive shafts. They are telescoping, so it makes it a little bit easier to kind of work on. You can kind of pull out this module by itself, but a little bit of downside there, I think. Small wing in the back, of course, and then in the rear end, again, you have the steel CVAs. You also have adjustable rear toe with these toe links here in the back. And then again, like we mentioned, pivot balls. Kind of some cool things. They do actually have little boots or rubber gaskets, I guess, covering the pivot balls, prevent dirt from getting in. Also from the outside as well, they also have little gaskets, which kind of these quick access holes, so you can actually tighten down those pivot balls. So pretty nice there. I think that's kind of a cool feature, something unusual for this type of vehicle. The outdrives are pretty beefy. The CVAs are pretty beefy. The overall vehicle is actually pretty easy to work on. No real concerns there. It's a little different because the design is quite different with the laydown shocks. The discs you kind of get at from underneath. But yeah, pretty cool design overall. It is unusual. I think it's one of the high points of this vehicle. It's got the low center of gravity with basically the batteries, you know, below the disc or sort of below the electronics and the rest of the chassis. Keeps the weight down low. Obviously the laydown shocks, again, keeps the weight down low. So it is quite unusual within this design. One final thing to note is that it's got kind of this long arm type design. So the suspension arms are super long, very narrow pivot down the middle. This allows it to roll a little bit more, get you a little more traction. And then kind of coupled with that LCG type design with all the weight kind of really flat, this, you know, the body sits down really low, you know, it allows it to handle a little bit better. So it is an interesting design, a lot of adjustments, probably more than your typical RTR basher. So there's plenty of tunability within here. Pretty easy to work on. So overall, I'm going to give the build or the design 4 stars. I think it is above average design. It is quite weird, and you know, you're not going to find other vehicles like this out in the market. A couple little things I don't like the dual servos. I'm not sure really all these tie rods and stuff give it an advantage in terms of like durability and stuff like that, but I do think it is pretty interesting LCG design, handles quite well, easy to work on. So yeah, overall I think it's a pretty good design. I'm going to give it 4 stars, although it is quite different. Moving on to the performance, and we're really talking about a few different things. We're talking about the power of the vehicle. You know, is this electronics package pretty powerful? Is it strong? Is it fast? We're also going to be talking about the handling, the jumping and landing. This does not include durability. That is a completely separate category. This is just purely about how it actually drives itself. Power-wise, I think it's kind of average. You know, there are other 6S systems out there that come on RTR vehicles that I think are faster, like the Team Crowley stuff is quite a bit faster. I think there's some other power systems out there that are, you know, a little bit slower. The Armas, in my opinion, tend to drive a little bit slower. The radio is pretty good. Handling actually is pretty decent overall. I think the Team Corelli stuff handles a little bit better out of the box. The Armor stuff actually handles a little bit worse out of the box, although the design points of the Armor are built a little more towards durability and, you know, jumping it super high rather than kind of the handling performance. Out of the box, a ton of steering. The front end has quite a bit of grip. The tires are not particularly good. They're kind of average for an RTR, so it's something kind of worth looking into, getting better tires. But with some tuning, with some adjustments to the shocks, the springs, these sort of rocker arms and sort of the toe and stuff like that, I think you can get it handled pretty well. I do have a video out on that. You know, you don't have to spend a whole lot of money, maybe like $20 or so. Get some cheap parts, put them on, and I think you'll find that it actually drives pretty well. So out of the box, I think the performance is kind of fair. It does slap the rear end quite a bit out of the box, so jumping it, you know, more than like 8 feet high or so, it does tend to bottom out quite a bit, especially in the rear. The front's not too bad, but the rear does need some tuning to kind of get it to jump a little bit better and land a little better and not, you know, take so much impact. So out of the box, I think the performance is a 3. You can get some better performance, of course, with just some tuning, but, you know, sort of the standard Traxxas E-Revo 2.0. I think average performance overall, 3 stars. You know, it's not the best, not the worst, but somewhere in the middle. This truck has been out for 3 years, and to be honest with you, I held off on picking one of these up for a really, really long time, and that's because everyone complained that the durability on this thing was really low. Like, it broke really easily, these tie rods would bend, the shocks would pull off the rod ends, you know, this rear brace would break, all that kind of stuff. So what is it about the E-Revo 2.0? Is it actually fragile? Some other people say it's actually pretty durable. You know, they hardly break anything. So I wanted to pick one of these up for myself and to find out for myself how the E-Revo 2.0 is durability wise. And in my opinion, you know, it's kind of somewhere in the middle. It's not the most durable truck out there. I think the Arma is more durable. I think out of the box, it actually is not fragile either. You can send it, you know, 8 or 10 feet high without any problems. Once you go bigger than that, you will want to, you know, you will run into some issues. I did break a drive shaft. I did have a rear drive shaft pop out. I did bend one of these rear toe links, as well as break a ball cup. I did have the pivot ball suspensions back out, so that is something I do recommend you check periodically. But yeah, other than that, no real issues. As you can see, I'm still running the plastic rear chassis brace. I'm not running limiter straps or anything like that. I haven't had any issues with that. Some people have problems with this motor overheating. I didn't see any problems with that. I did jump this super high, you know, like 30 feet high, double backflips through the air, landing on flat ground, and it was able to take that. Now, things I do think still break even if you land this thing clean, but if you're able to drive this, you know, reasonably well, I think this is not a beginner truck by any means. I mean, no 6S 8-scale truck should be purchased by beginners, in my opinion. I know people do, but in my opinion, you should have some, you know, experience with RC cars before you pick up something like this. And I think a lot of, you know, your experience with durability will relate to how well you're able to drive. A more experienced driver that can land this cleanly is going to have a lot less problems than someone, you know, who runs into a curb at 60 miles per hour, or, you know, lands on, like, you know, one corner sideways. That's definitely going to break stuff. But on the other hand, I did, you know, crash pretty spectacularly a few times and didn't really have too many problems other than what I mentioned. So overall durability, I think is somewhere average. I think I'm going to give it 3 stars in the durability category. Things break even if you land cleanly, but I don't think it's fragile by any means. Obviously, I've only owned this for a month, and I'm sure over the next year I'll break other things. But yeah, it's not like something where you look at it wrong, it's going to break. If you can drive, if you can land this thing, if you're not jumping it like 30, 40 feet high, I think it'll actually survive pretty well. So overall in durability category, 3 stars, somewhere in the middle. It's not super fragile, not super durable, but, you know, I think it's okay. Traxxas is one of the largest brands in the RC space. You know, almost every local hobby shop is going to carry Traxxas parts. Really, one of the greatest things about Traxxas is that if you break it, you know, break an arm, break a, you know, a hub or something like that, you can generally just kind of walk into your hobby shop, pick up a part, and have it up and running, in like 20 minutes or so. So that's one of the really cool things. The Erevo 2.0 has been around for a long time. So, it's one of the more popular vehicles. I don't think it's as popular as, say, their 4x4 10 scale stuff, but yeah, most shops are going to carry some Erevo parts as well. So really one of the big benefits of Traxxas is that you can oftentimes just fix it the same day that you broke it and get out there and run again. So yeah, in the support and maintenance category, I'm going to give it 5 stars. This truck is also pretty easy to work on. There's some weird quirks and stuff you got to learn, sort of how to take apart the bottom, how to get to this power module, but it's really only like 4 screws, disconnect the drive shaft, so you can pull this whole thing out and service the diffs, service the motor, pinion, whatever you need to do. Pretty cool design in there. Yeah, so support and maintenance I think is one of the strong points of the Erevo 2.0. Best in class. I'm going to give it 5 stars. Their warranty is not as good as, say, Horizon Hobby, so generally people are breaking these things and not getting free replacement parts, but oftentimes Traxxas will work with you. They'll maybe get you another ESC for half price or another motor. They do have like these upgrade programs and stuff like that. So yeah, overall Traxxas I think is definitely best in class in support and maintenance. I'm going to give it 5 stars. The Erevo 2.0 price has fluctuated throughout the years. I think it was originally like $550 or so. Someone correct me if I'm wrong. That was actually, I think, a pretty fair price, especially with the latest round of price increases across the board. Pretty much everybody has increased their prices. The Armas, like the Crane V5, I think is $600 at this time of video. The Team Corelli, I think, is around $500 if I'm not mistaken. Someone correct me if I'm wrong. I haven't checked on that lately, but yeah. The Erevo 2.0 currently sells for $650. It is the most expensive 8-scale truggy like this in its class. I do think it's fairly pricey. Now my rating on durability, or my rating on value, is compared to other vehicles, but my rating on value has nothing to do with the durability, the performance, anything like that. It actually talks purely about how much it costs to make this and what you get in the box as compared to what you're paying for. So $650, most expensive vehicle out there. If you look at it, this is mainly a plastic vehicle, very few metal parts. The electronics, plastic geared servos, plastic geared center drive shafts, plastic chassis. Now, I'm not talking about the durability of this. I think there are advantages to all this plastic, but I am just talking about what are you paying for as opposed to what Traxxas is actually shipping you. I think the radio is a little bit better than average, but the vehicle itself, it is made in Taiwan, so I'll give them a little bit of credit for that. Labor rates in Taiwan are higher than China, but I do think they kind of overcharge you for this vehicle. Looking at what you get in the box, the shocks are actually downgraded from the 1.0. They used to have Teflon coated shocks. Now they're just bare aluminum, so they're not quite as smooth. Almost everything on this vehicle is plastic, and so in my opinion, I think it's overpriced for what you pay. This is pretty much the most expensive RTR 8-scale 6S truggy out there, yet I kind of feel like you get the least. So in the value category, I'm actually going to give it 1 star. Traxxas, has always charged a premium for their vehicles. Now you get a little bit back in sort of the support, maybe you get a little bit better durability, but overall, yeah, value has always kind of been one of the weaker points of Traxxas. I do think they overcharge for their vehicles. I'm going to give it 1 star. That's kind of my opinion. So final thoughts on the Traxxas Erevo 2.0. So this is my opinion. In my opinion alone, you may have a different one, but I think it's actually a pretty good truck. It's probably my favorite Traxxas. It's by no means the most durable. The Max is the beast. The X Max is also quite durable. Even their 4x4 line isn't too bad once you upgrade the shocks. And the Erevo 2.0, of course, is not the most durable Traxxas out there. A lot of people care only about durability and how often they break things, but to me, I think there's a whole lot more that goes in an RC car than how often it breaks. The performance is actually quite good. It does handle quite well once you put on some adjustments and some different springs and shocks and tune the diffs and stuff a little bit better. I think some better tires also will serve you quite well in the performance. It just handles really well. It's just a lot of fun. I'm not really sure what it is about this vehicle. Maybe because it's so different than every other 6S 1/8 scale tray up there that I just find myself having a ball, having a blast driving this thing every time. It handles a little bit differently than other vehicles out there. It is quite light, which I think is a benefit. Most other vehicles have, you know, heavy aluminum chassis, heavy aluminum shock towers, and this thing's, you know, almost all plastic, which, you know, again, I'm going to denigrate it a little bit in the value category, but I have to admit, it actually drives quite well. It is a lot of fun, a lot of tunability with the adjustable toe links here in the back. I do think there are a couple upgrades I think you should get. I'm running Techno turnbuckles here on the rear steering links, but, you know, overall, you know, I don't find the durability to be an issue. It does break occasionally when I run it, when I even landing on all fours, but you know, in general, I think it's kind of typical for other vehicles out there. So yeah, Erevo 2.0, actually one of my favorite vehicles to run, especially this year. As you can see, I've been running this thing a lot on my channel, probably more than your average RTR that I pick up. I just almost always want to drive this thing. A couple things I don't like: the plastic geared servos, you know, 2 of them. There's not really a reason for that. I don't really like the dual battery tray. You know, I prefer a single 6S packs. Not sure I really like all these tie rods and stuff like that. The laydown shocks, I think, are I mean, they're a benefit in the way it drives, but, you know, there are things I don't like about it. But I have to admit, it actually is really fun to drive. It does handle a little bit differently than your other vehicles with that LCG chassis, with that lightweight. So it's super fun vehicle to drive. If it's your first RC car, I do not recommend you pick this up at all. It is kind of weird. Certainly is not gonna be able to take as much abuse if you don't really know how to drive, if you're crashing this thing, if you're cartwheeling it all the time, if you're landing on one corner, if you're landing it upside down, landing on the wing, if you're crashing a lot, this is not the best car to get. But if you're a little bit more of an experienced driver, you want to try something different, I think it's a ton of fun. And yeah, one of my favorite vehicles, probably my favorite Traxxas as well. So anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to hit the like, share, and subscribe buttons. Look for more videos soon. Let me know what your comments are on this if you've got an Erevo 2.0. And thanks for watching.